Hello everyone. Now we're going to jump into lesson planning. So here we go. Okay, just a quick review. Unit planning is our overall, this is the entire year planning and then corresponding with the Alberta Program of Studies objectives. Then we pulled it down to unit planning. So here are our objectives. Here are our objectives from, I really have to take some lessons on how to draw circles. Here are some objectives, the objectives from the year plan, and then we start to pull into specifically what we're going to do on particular days in the unit. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at what do you do Monday morning between 9 and 10, and how do you actually plan for that? Because this is still too broad. We're going to pull it down to lesson planning. This is your life. This is your life as a teacher. I love lesson planning. I love digging in and going, okay, I can do this for 10 minutes, then I can switch to this, and then I have to go back and get this, and putting it all together in this beautiful little package that is fulfilling the Alberta Program of Studies objectives. Okay, so basically, let's have a look. Why do a lesson plan? Why do we do lesson plans? Basically ensures you have a plan. What we want to alleviate is what I call shooting from the hip. Oh, I'll do this today. Oh, I'll do this today. Oh, I'll do this now. You don't have time. You have so little time with these kids and you have so much to do with them that you want to make sure that you have a plan, that you're not wasting your time and their time. And make sure that you fulfill objectives, because if you've done your year to your unit and then you pull from your unit into your lesson plans, you know that you are fulfilling all of those 95 objectives. Keeps you organized, right? You have to be pretty organized as a teacher. It helps you anticipate issues, because you can be like, oh, if I want them to work in groups, I know that these kids are not getting along right now, so then maybe I'll make the groups. I won't let them decide their own groups. So you can anticipate some of those issues, which then leads into this one, which helps with classroom management, right? Because you can anticipate those things beforehand versus it just happening and then you having to react. It also helps you consider the child, the children, or the group. So again, this is a little bit of, if you know that you have a child who really struggles with reading, you probably aren't going to give them, 6 pages of reading to do and say, okay, now you have to read this out loud in front of the class, right? So you can kind of go, okay, how can I differentiate this? Okay. You can consider variety in lesson. So if you are only just always reading to them, maybe they should do some reading, maybe they should do some writing, those kind of things. Also, you want to be doing some kinesthetics. You want to be doing some written stuff on the board so they can actually see it. You want to be talking a little bit. Again, a little bit of variety in your lesson. And it helps you ponder the material, the setup, the time, and the space. So if you have a really an activity that has lots of pieces, like you've got sentences and they're all mixed up, you've got to have those sentences cut out and you've got to have them ready to go. Okay, so that's why you do a lesson plan. Okay, one of the most important parts of the lesson plan for you this year is figuring out how you will know if the kids actually learned what you hoped they would learn, which is ultimately what you want in the lesson. You want them to learn what you wanted them to learn, and then you have to figure out how you can tell if they learned that. Okay, so and I'll show you where this is in the lesson plan, but I want you to think about it right off the top. How will I know students have achieved learning outcomes? Use a Bloom's verb in this section. If you use a Bloom's verb, it will work. If you do not, it usually doesn't work. So use any one of these Bloom's verbs in that particular section, and I again will show you this section. In this section, you need to be able to visualize what the child is actually doing. So if you say the child will understand the concept of figurative language, what does it look like? How do I actually know if the child understands? But if I say the child will identify a noun and a verb in 6 sentences, now you can start to actually visualize a child actually doing that. Okay, so this is the section that you will ultimately use to assess. And again, we're not going to do a lot of that this year, but this is what you're going to use as your basis for assessment. And it's, again, what you wanted. You have to figure out if the child actually learned what you wanted him or her to learn. And you have to know what you want them to learn, or else it just becomes what we call a Pinterest grab. You're just like, woo, this is fun, and this is fun, and this is fun, but you don't know why you're doing it, and you don't know what you really want the child to learn. Okay, so I'm just going to go here, make sure I didn't forget anything. This is what it actually looks like on your lesson plan. And again, I'm going to show you how this fits in, but I want you to really focus on this particular part. So in your lesson plan template, you will have a section that says, how will I know students have achieved the learning outcomes? And you will put in Bloom's verbs here. Okay, so I've coordinated them. Students will show, here it is, Bloom's verb, show information in an organized way orally to a partner and written on a whiteboard. Okay, so what's the child going to do to show you that they can organize information? They're going to show the information organized way. They're going to do it how? Orally with a partner, and then they're going to write it on the board. Okay, getting the idea that you actually have to be able to picture what the child is actually doing in your mind, in your mind's eye. Okay, students will utilize their background knowledge of Reader's Theater characteristics to analyze the video and create a 2 stars and a wish list. So they're utilizing background information, they're going to analyze a video, and then create a 2 stars and a wish. Can you picture it? You should be able to picture it. Right? And finally, students will rephrase their learning on their day 7 checklist with a partner of whom clarification and questions can be asked. So again, here it is, rephrase, show, utilize, analyze. Okay. The blue ones here, these are what we call higher level Bloom's verbs. And we want you to be using these as well as these. These ones, the yellow ones, are easier, right? Choose, find, spell, illustrate. Like those are lower level Bloom's thinking. They don't require as much thought. Whereas adapt something, improve something, test something, predict is a different level of thinking. Okay, so think about when we talk about higher level Blooms, these are the Bloom's verbs that we're wanting you to be thinking about. Okay, let's now, I just want to make sure there's nothing else that I want to tell you about in there. Oh, I do before we jump into it because I want to highlight these. Okay, at the bottom of the lesson plan is what's called a lesson analysis. And you will see that it says cooperative learning, movement breaks, learning activities, and higher order questions. So what we're looking for in these is here we go. In the cooperative learning strategies, we want you to think about, you're learning about like Kagan type structures, think, pair, share, stand up, pair up, anything where they are working together, round robin, find somebody who did this. So anything around Kagan you can use as a cooperative learning strategy. So they're working in cooperation with other kids. Okay, movement breaks are basically movement breaks. So basically you need to get the kids moving. If you have a 45-minute lesson, you should get them moving at least once. And again, jumping jacks, hand presses, jump, balance, just run on the spot. Give them something so that they're actually active. If you can, line up your movement breaks with your outcomes. One of your third-year colleagues did a lesson and she was doing penguins. And her movement break was actually them walking back to their seat like a penguin. And I thought, brilliant, because she worked the movement break in there. She got them moving, but she reiterated her objectives of them learning about penguins. Okay, so again, try to think about that. Learning activities. Now, these are based on Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences, which we don't really use as to sort of put people in particular silos of how they learn, but they're good reminders of the ways that we can actually have some variety in our lessons. So maybe you want to have the kids actually singing or doing some interaction with music, not just listening to music, but actually singing or playing. You might actually want to have the kids doing some kinesthetics. So you might want to, if you are talking about a particular character, you might want to actually have a child be that character in there, and the child is moving around kind of thing, like the character moved. You might also want to be bringing in some logical mathematical. Again, just different ways of actually teaching instead of always, because what we normally, where is it here? Sorry, kind of going around like this, is we generally stay with the oral, with the spoken, and then the written. So kids who are more social, who like to work in groups, who like to do more hands-on, sometimes those kids miss concepts because they just didn't have a chance to learn it in a way that might have made sense to them. Okay, so that is the learning activity when you see learning activity on your lesson plan. And then finally, when you see higher order questions, what we're referring to is the analysis, evaluating, and creating section. So back to these Bloom's verbs. So you should be asking some of these type questions. So you should be asking a child to, can you elaborate? I want you guys to elaborate on this concept. I want you to imagine if we changed one or two things in the story, how would the ending be different, right? So you want, this is what we want you, these are the questions that we want you to be asking. So putting these verbs in your question will get you to those higher order questions. Okay, here we go. So that I wanted to just introduce those before I show you the plan. So basically, a lesson plan, when you start writing lesson plans, is we want you to include enough detail that a substitute teacher could teach from it. So, you probably have seen your practicum teacher, and they have a teacher book, and they have one page for the whole day, and they have like 6 words in maybe each spot. You'll get there. You'll get there. That will be you. You'll be able to lesson plan on a napkin eventually. But right now, we want you to write out tons of detail so that we know that you know what's going on. And what'll happen is the more that you write, the more lesson plans that you do, and the more that you think about all these things that we're going to ask you to think about, the more it will just become part of how you lesson plan. And you won't be able to think about lesson planning without being able to pull in all of these parts, which is ultimately what we want you to do. Okay. Also in the lesson plan, if I'm reading your lesson plan, I should be able to picture exactly what is happening in the classroom at all times. So if it seems weird to me, or there's skips, like suddenly the kids were at the carpet and now they're at their desks, and I'm like, how did you transition? Between those two, you have to be thinking about, this is the minutia, right? This is year plan, unit plan, lesson plan. What are you actually going to do every 5, 10, 15 minutes in there? Okay, let us now have a little bit of a look at what a unit plan looks like. Okay, I'm going to move this in here. I gave this to you in, it's under Lesson Plan Explained. You can also go to the Google Doc. It looks a little bit like this, and it's a little bit better, I think, for you to go through. Okay, so basically here we go. We're going to just go through the parts of the lesson plan. I'm going to try to move myself out a little bit here so that you can see what's going on here. So basically the outcomes of the lesson, these are from here. These are from your unit plan, which are ultimately from your year plan, right? So again, you're not making up objectives. That year plan comes down to the unit plan, comes down to the lesson plan. Generally, you want to have 2 to 3. So I think I wrote that over here on the side. These come from your unit plan, 2 to 3 per lesson. Use verbatim, copy straight from the Alberta Program of Studies. Don't mess around with them here. Okay. This now is the section that I prefaced before. How will I know students have achieved the learning outcomes? This is the key for you guys for this year, is you need to know how to take it from these outcomes, these program of studies outcomes, and actually put them in a way that you can actually figure out if your kids actually learned what you were hoping they would learn. Because these are still too general. Present to peers ideas and information on a topic of interest in a well-organized form. It's not specific enough. But here, you start to get to specific. So again, include a Bloom's verb in each sentence. Be specific. You should be able to visualize exactly what's going on. Avoid vague statements like understand. If you see understand in this section, you got to go back and get rid of it. Okay, and know that this may take a number of lessons to fully achieve these outcomes. Think about what students achieved today in this lesson to fulfill the learning outcome. So you may ultimately have these outcomes for 2 days. And maybe you'll switch out one of the outcomes for a 3rd day and keep 2, right? So sometimes you will be able to fulfill them in 1 day, but lots of times in elementary school, you will have to you'll have to have the similar objectives over a couple days. Okay, let's look at the hook. The hook is, you want to hook those kids, like you want to grab their attention and you want to get them excited about your lesson. So it's not a time to gather students together. This is Christy's, how do you make your students, we worked on this together as an education team. That's where I just happened to put these comments in, but these are comments from your entire ed team. How do you make your students lean forward in excitement about your class? Okay, so again, I like to say it's about 30 to 45 seconds. If it gets into several minutes, it's not a hook anymore. So what are you going to do now? Like, nab those kids and get them excited. Okay, then we go on to the learning activities, the learning opportunities. This is kind of probably what you think lesson planning is, and it's definitely here. These are, where am I? Put enough detail again in here that someone else could teach this lesson. Point form is great. So you don't have to have big long sentences, because in the moment you're not going to have a chance to read all these sentences. So here we go. I put my actual time here. Get my pencil again. I have my actual how many minutes, and then I actually have my time, because again, when you're in the midst of a lesson, sometimes you're like 30 minutes, when did I start? But if you have the actual time, you're good. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. You should be able to visualize what I'm doing. Conduct a mini lesson on carpet to full class on characteristics of Reader's Theater. My PowerPoint is under Reader's Theater into PowerPoint in grade 4 Reader's Theater folder. Be super specific about where your resources are. If you just use PowerPoint, you will curse yourself if you can't remember where you put the PowerPoint, or you want to come back to this lesson in a year. You won't remember where that PowerPoint is. So be super specific in there. Okay? Put as much detail in as you need. So if you think you might forget the characteristics, put them there. Okay? And then you're going to watch grade 4 Reader's Theater example, and then you're going to go through all this. I'm going to leave this with you to peruse. I'm going to just explain the sections, and then let you actually look at my lesson plan. Okay, so this is, how do I check that students understand instructions? How do I know that they understand instructions? So focus on how you know students understand. How will you know that they know what their task is before you send them to work? So repeat back each step of the instruction. Ask Billy, Sarah, and Matt to orally repeat back each step of order. Oftentimes, we assume kids are actually paying attention to all of these instructions that we're giving. Oftentimes, they aren't. And what happens is then they leave, and they go to work, and they're like, what do we do? It happens in breakout rooms all the time. Haha, I know. Okay, materials needed, again. Be super specific. How many markers? How many pieces of paper? If using online resource, be sure the link is here. Again, just be super organized here, because this is what you will need. You don't want your lesson to be thrown off because you forgot to get 3 clipboards or whatever it is. Okay. So these sections you do not have to worry about for this year. So differentiation and accommodations, I left them here. You're welcome to look at them. But for your lesson plans that you're going to be creating for assignment 2, you do not have to worry about differentiation accommodation. You will next year, but I really want you to focus on on figuring out how to get these outcomes under control, and then what are our learning opportunities in here. Okay, so the other thing I want to bring to your attention is the transition. So what will students do when they're finished, or how will we move to the next learning opportunity? So again, try to keep transitions linked to the outcomes of the lesson. So if doing a lesson on B behavior, have them move from carpet time to desk time, imitating B behavior. Okay. If you can, try not to have them going from carpet to desk to carpet to desk to carpet to desk, because you'd lose a ton of time just physically moving, and that's when your classroom management issues are going to happen. So again, think about what are they going to do if a kid is finished really early, and then how are you actually going to physically move the class from one learning opportunity to the next. Okay, then basically what this is it's another learning opportunity, and I would like you to do, if you have sort of separate learning opportunities, do 2 separate boxes, and then you have to do all of this again, because it'll be different for a different learning opportunity. Okay, so you might go, oh, I'm just going to shove it all in one box, but how you check for understanding, if they understand instructions, might be quite different in a different learning opportunity. Okay, so again, I'm going to leave this with you. Again, you don't have to worry about here. Okay, I want to highlight this. Closure. This is another one that is important that you understand, that it's linked to your objectives. It's not just oh yeah, okay, see you later, kids, or thanks for a nice class. This is when you review what you wanted students to learn. This is crucial learning time, and not just a time to send them off to the next class. So this is when you are wrapping it up, and you are actually seeing, did the kids actually learn what I wanted them to learn, right? So this, again, you want to think about everything that you do in your lesson depends on your learning outcomes, which is why we want you to get this under control right now, because you will fight it all the time if you don't get it under control. Okay, so closure, again, it's not just see you kids. It's definitely okay, how can I review, and how can I figure out if they learned what I wanted them to learn? Okay, this is that lesson plan analysis that I was talking about with this slide here. So this is what you're going to do. You're going to look back through your lesson plan, and you're going to see these things. This information must be in your learning opportunity. If it's not in your learning opportunity, you need to go back and put some of these things in your lesson. Don't just write them in. We get really angry when it's like, those things are not in your lesson plan. Don't just write them in. So if you look back and you have no cooperative learning strategies, we want you to go back and figure out how you can include them. Because again, what this will do is it will help you to start to think about these things sort of almost subconsciously, and they will become part of how you lesson plan. Okay, And then reflection and revision, that comes, okay, YouTube video really helped them visualize. This is actually after you teach it. Writing on personal whiteboard made me help me assess. Be sure to hand in whiteboards immediately so that they don't get stepped on when moving to the next activity, like some really practical things. Okay, I'm going to leave this with you to peruse because I think as you work through it, you might have some questions, and bring those questions with you to our collaborate session, because ultimately you have a lot of decisions to make. Decisions as a teacher. You have a lot of decisions. So how are you actually going to create learning opportunities? So things like, are you going to read out loud or silently? Are you going to do individual or small group or full class? Who decides small groups? Are you going to show a video or are you going to an image? Is it going to be teacher-centered or student-centered? Are you going to do some worksheets? Are you going to do it on carpet or your tables? Which learning strategy would be best? How will I handle my materials and take back in materials? How can I record my observations during a busy class? So many decisions and ways to teach the concept. Yep. That's what you bought. That's what you bought in for, right? This is the exciting part of teaching, is that there's so many fun decisions that you make, and you just have to make some decisions and go. And sometimes you'll make great decisions and sometimes you'll make mediocre decisions. And that's why you reflect and you change those mediocre so that they become great the next time. Okay. So what we're going to do in our collaborate time, we're going to have some year planning time, we'll have a little unit planning time, and then we'll have some lesson planning time. I want you to use my Reader's Theater lesson as a jumping off point. So then I want you to, using the same program of study outcomes, develop a new How Will I Know Students Have Achieved the Learning Outcomes section. So I want, instead of these outcomes, I want you to come up with new outcomes still based on these program of studies. Program of studies outcomes. There we go. That's the complete sentence. Okay, so you don't have to do anything. I want you to think about this, though. You don't have to like write a whole bunch of things down, but have a bit of a go with it. And then what different learning opportunities could you develop to teach those learning outcomes? And again, we're going to just jot down some things. Okay, so then that's this section. So you're going to go, okay, instead of conducting a mini lesson, I'm going to do something different. Instead of watching a grade 4 Reader's Theater example, I'm going to do something different. Because, again, my Reader's Theater lesson, it's a good solid lesson. Is it the most brilliant lesson ever? I'll answer that. No. But it's a good solid lesson that I could say I fulfilled the objectives, and I could tell if the kids fulfilled the objectives. Okay, so this is what you're going to do during Collaborate. Then also is I'm going to send you a reading of They All Saw a Cat. And so I'm going to send a recording of that so you can watch it before we have class in Collaborate. And I want you to use it as, get rid of that N, starting point for a thematic lesson on perspective. And I want you to use Alberta Program of Studies grade 6. These are your three Program of Studies objectives that I want you to use. And I want you to, what you're going to do is you're just going to jot down as many, here we go. You're going to change those Alberta Program Studies to How Will I Know Students Have Achieved the Learning Outcome? So again, back to this section. Can you tell? I really want you to understand this. And then we're just going to jot down numerous ideas for learning opportunities. So how could you actually teach that? Okay, it's going to be a wild Collaborate session. Be ready to jump into, this is super, this is your life. This is year planning, unit planning, lesson planning is your life as a teacher. And I think that it'll be fun to jump into that with you on Collaborate. All right, take care, everybody.